Welcome in to the Vultures Row podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Joey Bonsanti, sitting across the laptop from me. We got Tony Vegas, we got Pat Winters. Pat, how we doing?
I'm excited, guys. Busier day than anticipated. I mean, Sunday night was obviously a pretty crazy day, and from the Jets' perspective, we had some moves, but very exciting day nonetheless. We got our quarterback, getting ready to talk about it, and some other moves too. So, Let's go.
I'm feeling good too, Joey. I mean, it's always good to check off quarterback. It was the biggest looming question of the offseason, and to have that figured out day one of free agency is great. As Pat rips,
I spelling salt. I'm ready to go.
That's exciting.
I love it. I love it. Then we got the cornerback signing. That was a little bit more of a controversial one, but we'll get into it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, and a re-signing as well. The Jets retain Jamien Sherwood, but let's start off with the big news. It's Justin Fields. Get our quarterback. The deal was 2 years, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed. So I think a little bit more than what people had anticipated. But at the rate that quarterbacks are going in the current market, I guess it's really not too bad. I know, Pat, you weren't too keen on the move a couple months ago and leading up to this, but what are your thoughts as we've actually signed Fields now?
So I wasn't crazy about this, I don't know, when we first started doing live episodes and, about over a month or two ago, but I've slowly warmed up to it. And overall, I'm indifferent to it, but I'm more happy because given the options available, he was probably, from a realistic perspective of who was available to us, like a top 2 to 3 option and not 3 for us this season. I think once this thing got down to Jets Steelers, I really didn't think he was going to go back to Pittsburgh. It made zero sense to me. Why would he go back to Pittsburgh even if they were a better situation, which you can make an argument. But how could he have truly believed they were committed to him after last season when he played well, won games, was benched? Then when Russ didn't perform, he wasn't given another opportunity. So I felt that once we saw that he was hitting free agency, this always seemed like it was leaning towards the Jets. My biggest question going into it with Fields was how are they going to commit to him? And I think the contract gave us a promising indication of that, and that's that he's going to be QB1 right out of the gate. 2 years, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed. That's a win-win for both sides. For Fields, he's going to get the opportunity he wanted. I don't see this being like a BS open competition with Tyrod. I think that was part of the selling point of Fields as well. I don't think he would have come here if he didn't get that commitment. They aren't paying him $20 million a year to do that. And like I said before, that's great. Like, if you're going to make this move, give him the full commitment to be the next reclamation project. And at least from the contract perspective, they're doing that. TBD on the coaching. But again, why wouldn't they, right? So, and from the Jets' perspective, this is a low-risk, high-reward move. He's 26, former high draft pick, has shown upside to be a quality starter in this league with improved passing. And at the bare minimum, he's a rushing floor that's going to bring a new serious element to this offense that's so desperately we've been lacking for such a long time. It's going to give them that brand of football that we can all get behind, that they can get behind, which is run the absolute shit out of the football with Justin and Brees and Braylon Allen, run RPO concepts. And in addition to that, he has a base foundation with a few added pieces to actually have a quality supporting cast. Obviously, the relationship with Garrett Wilson. So this also takes an immense amount of pressure off of the Jets in the draft as well in terms of quarterback. We'll probably touch more on that later. But it leaves them in a really flexible position for this year, next year, and beyond. If Justin works out, great. You have your guy. If not, you move on, no strings attached. And I'm also just happy from a fan perspective, and I'm happy for the fans because it was looking pretty bleak not too long ago when it looked like it was like just about a week ago he was a lock to go back to Pittsburgh. When we did that beer segment in episode 1, I said I'd be excited just out of desperation of the quarterback market and what the alternatives were. And this shows me that Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji really do want to give this year a chance, give the fans something that they can have some hope for and excitement and go to games and see a style of play that we have seen to a degree in the past a long time ago do well for us. And that's run the shit out of the football, control the clock, play good defense, and that's a recipe to win games. So I will be all in on Fields for now. He deserves every opportunity. It doesn't come without questions. He has to make improvements. But it's an exciting move for Jets fans. It's a breath of fresh air for something new and different this season. And they should be we should all be happy that they're trying to truly brand this, should they build this brand of football that we expect with a move like signing Justin Fields.
I think if you showed that clip of you just talking about Justin Fields to yourself 3 or 4 weeks ago, you would have sold your past self on Justin Fields. So that was a really good job. Tony, I know as much as people don't like to believe it, you were plugged into the situation a little bit. Tell us about like how it progressed with Fields and then like what your thoughts are overall on Fields.
Yeah. Well, Pat makes a really good point. It's so funny because once you're staring down the barrel of reality, you know, a couple weeks ago, Justin Fields, you're like, you can't read a defense, all this stuff. And all of a sudden, Connor Hughes is on our podcast telling us about Carson Wentz and Marcus Mariota, and all of a sudden, Justin Fields seems like the next Peyton Manning. But
yeah,
he's so you know the process for it. It really was always Jets Steelers. That was what I was told the entire time. Steelers upped their offer 2 days ago. They wanted him back, and ultimately, there's a little bit of distrust there on his end. Being that he was benched after going 4-2, he wanted that guaranteed starting position, and the Jets offered that. You don't pay a guy $20 million to sit on the bench, so he ultimately decided to take a chance and come to New York. My reaction to it, I love it. I've been on this the entire time. 26 years old, I believe, at the start of the season. Obviously, going to come in right away and help us establish that run-first offense that Aaron Glenn wants to install here. And it's just upside. It's so much more fun than the other options. It's crazy. I mean, like I said, Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota, these guys offer no upside, and Justin Fields is a fun option. We go to a lot of games, all three of us, and I don't know about you guys, but I'd much rather watch Justin Fields running around than some of these other options, even Tyrod Taylor. So we have Fields. He's durable. You have a good backup in Tyrod Taylor. It takes a lot of pressure off the draft. You don't need to take a guy. You're not locked into a guy in day 2 anymore. It's not like it's Tyrod, different veteran, and that day 2 pick because you have that upside already. So now we can focus in the middle rounds on filling out holes in the middle of the defense. At the back end of the defense, it opens up a lot of things. And for me, I knew it was going to be a multi-year deal, but to see it actually come to fruition, I love that. It removes the I don't want to say risk, but we don't have a J.J. McCarthy behind a Sam Darnold, so having Justin Fields for 2 years instead of 1 is huge. Because listen, if he goes off and he has even a solid year, I would be very comfortable with him as a bridge quarterback for a 2-year period instead of 1. And if he erupts, we have him on a great deal. So I think this was the best possible move they could have made. My option A was trading up for Cam Ward, but that just wasn't very realistic. And, I think Darren Muji did a really good job here.
You brought up a good point, Tony, about just where they're at with the quarterback position in the next couple of years, right? Like, I'm not a cap guru, but Rodgers is on the books for 2 more seasons, I think it is, right, with the dead money, right?
Yeah.
So this all lines up where they're in a super flexible position where the money's going to come. I don't know if it's all, from a dead cap perspective, it's on the books, right? So they, in 2027, I guess you would say, they are free and clear. And that means that if Justin performs, great, you can extend him, right? If he's not the guy, okay, you're on, they are so flexible going forward with this contract that it's very exciting in that regard. And to your point, it's just nothing but upside and excitement for us. And it's going to be a different brand of football, and it's just something we can actually get ourselves behind rather than
buy in.
Going into the season with, okay, Tyrod, Jordan Travis, Kyle McCord, right? Like, again, would we do it? And Carson Wentz, let's say, right? Like, would we do it? Yeah, I mean, it would take a lot. But Connor was scaring the shit out of us last week with that Mariota Wentz talk. And, like, I really was like, man, we don't get Fields. Like, this is it. So
let me run some stats by listeners and viewers just so we kind of have a baseline of what we've seen from him last season and throughout his career. So 10 games last year and 6 starts for Pittsburgh in 24. Fields was 106 of 161, just at 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, while also adding 289 on the ground on 62 attempts and another 5 touchdowns. Like, was it the best season last year? No, but I mean, to start off the season, what were they, 4-2? He had 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, another 5 on the ground in total. Like, that's a lot of promise, and there's a lot to build on there. Who knows what he would have paced out for had he been the starter for the rest of the season. They eventually turned to Russ. They were hot in the start, but then they did not finish the season well at all. I think overall this move like you guys were saying. Like I know you guys have pretty much said all of the stuff, but I like the dart throw. I like the upside of it. It doesn't do anything if we sign Marcus Mariota and we win 6 games. But if we, sign Justin Fields, win 7, 8 games, I don't even think we'd get to 6 wins with Marcus Mariota. That'd be a freaking miracle. But overall, like, I feel like the cons are low. Like, what is the only con that he brings with him? Like, he hasn't done anything significant in 4 years, and he hasn't really shown much passing upside. Maybe Glenn views it as we can, and Tanner Entran views this as we can mold this guy into something. So if he does well, could he be your future? Possibly. If he doesn't, oh well, you move on. It's a 2-year deal, like you said, Pat and Tony. Like, in 2 years, we're going to be clear if there's no more Rodgers, no Fields on the book if everything goes to crap. So overall, I think this is the best option given what we were presented.
I think people have to remember the career trajectory a little bit of Justin Fields, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been out of Chicago if they didn't fall into the first pick. Most likely. Because he had a really high rushing floor. He ran for 1,100 yards in a season as a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. So he gets drafted by Chicago. He's on a trajectory. Again, did he leave a lot to be desired? Of course, right? Otherwise, he'd still be there. But it was almost like the Darnold, Zach Wilson situation for him, right? Where they kind of waltzed into a pick that, they really waltzed into a pick because they traded for it and they weren't expecting to get the number 1 overall pick, and they did. Like, they didn't go 1-15 and get the number 1 overall pick. They got it from Carolina, right? So he really probably wouldn't have been gone from Chicago. And then when you add that in, then he goes to Pittsburgh, and we just talked about it. He didn't play bad in Pittsburgh. He probably should have kept going. I remember when we were talking, because Russ's first start was against the Jets, I was like, man, I can't believe they're starting Russ right now. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Fields is playing good football. He had 4 fumbles. I mean, because everyone likes to look at the touchdown interception stat line. I get that. He did have 4 fumbles, so it wasn't perfect, but he was playing a brand of football that they were winning. So as long as we commit to the brand of football that Justin can play, it's going to – the floor is high with him.
Yeah, I would expect, this is my last point on this, and then I could pass it to you, Tony, if you have any more points on it. But, I don't think we're going to come out and see Justin Fields throwing for 250 to 300 yards a game. They're not going to try to reinvent the wheel with this kid. They're going to really try to target this offense around his legs and his running game. We're bringing back 4 of the 5 starters on the offensive line. I think they're really going to try to ground pound, and you're going to see just a run-heavy offense with Fields. I do not think he's going to be coming in here throwing 300 yards a game, so do not expect that. But Tony, if you have any last points here before we move on.
And all these guys are free agents for a reason, right? I mean, it doesn't come without any risk. If Justin Fields were a perfect quarterback, he wouldn't be an option for us. But the fact that you have a guy that can at least offer a little bit of upside, you get him on the open market, it's a slam dunk. I love the move, and very excited to see what he can bring to the table.
Guys like this don't really, very rarely kind of hit the market, right? And when they do, historically, at least so far, it's taken a couple of turns on how to get there, but it's worked out, right? Like, Baker had a couple, steps before he settled back in. We don't need to talk about Darnold. We know what happened there, right? But, a 26-year-old with this type of upside that really didn't – I don't know how to describe this. He didn't – I don't think he got – I think he, part of me thinks he kind of got screwed over a little bit. So, I'm excited about it. I could keep going on. But, I just think it's a very high upside move. So
yeah. So let's move on. I mean, this is the big reason why we're doing this emergency podcast tonight is because of Fields. But there were a couple other moves that we should talk about. And the first one being that the New York Jets brought back Jamien Sherwood. Me and Pat were kind of going at it a little bit. But I think you've changed your tone once you saw the actual contractual numbers. Pat, I'll start again with you. After digesting this a little bit more, bringing back one of our own here, what do you think about the move as a whole?
Yeah, sure. Look, first of all, I don't want to say that I hate Jamien Sherwood or the move or anything like that. I'm really happy to see a 5th-round pick who got converted from safety, that worked his tail off, that's a team leader, that all that stuff is a great message for the locker room. It's great for the team. This is exactly what you want when you draft a 5th-rounder. Right, that it pans out and you give him this type of contract. So great for Jamien. I'm super happy for him. He's a great Jet. I'm happy to see him back. I just, initially when I saw the contract, I was like, 15 a year, that's kind of crazy. Obviously, I know that's kind of where the market is right now, and this is what happens when players get to free agency and you don't extend them early, right? But once the contract details came out and it's really a 2-year deal and, they don't have really any guarantees when the cap number really spikes up, it's actually a really good deal for a player that's only going to hopefully get better. I don't read too much into the fact that he led the league in tackles and all that stuff because, look, and it's not all his fault. He was an effort guy flying around the ball. They were just getting run, they're running for 7-9 yards down their throats every play. So when you're making tackles 7 to 9 yards down the field, that doesn't really do it for me. But nonetheless, look, I'm happy about the move. I think it's, again, the way the contract was structured made the risk a little bit lower. He can and he gets better. He's going to get another contract too. So I hope it's with us.
Tone?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I could go into my closet right now and pull out my Jamie Sherwood jersey if you guys would like. I love it. I mean, the market okay, I want to preface this with something because we'll get to this in the next point too. With the corner we signed, these numbers are going to be a little bit inflated, right? I mean, that's just the case. The cap went up. I texted you guys earlier today. 12 is the new 8. So, when you see a guy like Jamie Sherwood get $15 million, a year, just look around the league at what other linebackers are getting. It's what the market dictates. We don't dictate the price; the market does, and it sends the right message to the locker room. There's not a lot of times where we extend homegrown talent, and to see us finally do that, it's awesome to see. I love Jamie Sherwood. He's fast. A guy that's fast and can tackle, running backs. You're going to find a use for him. I get it. It's going to be a scheme switch with Steve Wilkes in town, but they're going to find a use for him. And obviously, they see something in him. Nick Bolton got the same exact deal. Jamie Sherwood arguably had a better year than him. Is he a better player? Probably not. But the fact of the matter is, he was productive last year. He was one of our best defensive players. We drafted him, developed him. I get a different regime, but it sends the right message to the locker room. Hey, if you guys come here and you work your ass off, you're going to get paid, and you're going to be taken care of. And that's critical. And, God, I hope they do this with, Sauce and Garrett soon. But I love keeping homegrown talent. Sherwood's a great player. He would have gotten this deal, if not more, from another team had we let him hit the open market. And to see him, to see a jersey that I bought not go to waste in under a year, it's a good feeling for once.
Finally a jersey that panned out for you.
Well, yeah, I have Tittman, Sherwood. Who else? What's my other one? I have one more. And Will McDonald. That's 3 for 3.
That is pretty good. One more thing I wanted to touch on too was I really hope I'm very curious to see what you brought up about his fit with Steve Wilkes' defense. They're going to blitz a lot more, and the few times that we did see Sherwood blitz, he was pretty effective. So I think I'm very curious to see how that all pans out with him. Look. It would have been the other thing too is where I don't like the one con of this is obviously the Quincy Williams situation. How's that going to shake out now, right? He's making like half of the money that he is, and me personally, maybe you give him a Band-Aid deal for this year. I love Quincy.
29 years old.
You're investing a lot into the linebacker room for. Again, he's a year removed from an All-Pro, so I don't want to take away from that, but do you really think that's an elite linebacker combination, and you're $30 million a year hypothetically if you gave something to Quincy into that position already? That's the part where I'm just a little skeptical. Like, could a 3rd round or 4th round pick have replaced this at a cheaper cost? Again, you can't pay everybody every position, so and it's not necessarily a tier A premium position. So that's where my initial thoughts in my head was in the beginning. But again, the way they structured it, I think it does leave a little flexibility if they want to Band-Aid Quincy. But if they don't, let him walk. Just let him walk. He's going to be 29, 30 years old. He had a great run for us, and it was a great deal for us. But that's just something else that we have to factor in with this signing.
And I get worried now. And, I have a lot of pros to say about this, but in terms of a negative side of things, I don't know if I want to give Quincy that money, and I don't know if maybe he could hold out. He's on the last year of that deal, so I guess we'll have to see on that. But
yeah,
for me, with Sherwood, 154 total tackles last year, 95 solo. he played this stat to me like just blew my mind when I read it today. Sherwood played in 17 games last year, included 16 starts, and was the only player in the NFL to have multiple games with 17 or more tackles, which he accomplished twice. He was the first Jet player to accomplish that feat since David Harris back in '07. So that something like that really pops out to me. Another thing about this signing that I love is, when Muji and Glenn get up to the presser and they say, we really want to focus on keeping talent here, homegrown talent here, and they go out and within the first 3 months of the regime, they go out and they sign Sherwood, a guy that was brought here, a guy that worked his ass off, converted into a linebacker, and got better every year, and they sign him. Like, to me, that speaks volumes to what these guys actually are speaking truth to. So I was really happy to see that. And then another point I want to bring up is like a guy like Mosley. Like, we don't know what he's doing yet. Is he going to retire? Like, I don't know if he'll ever play another game again. So we got to look at that. But I agree with you, Pat. Like, the money thing for me, investing that much money into a linebacker room that is elite, maybe in their eyes. I don't know how much I would think that would be elite, but that's definitely a problem or an issue I foresee a little bit down the road. But hey, I'm happy we got our guy here. So.
Yeah, C.J. Mosley's still weirdly on the roster, right?
He'll be a post June 1st cut, it seems like.
Maybe, but wouldn't they just designate him to that at that point? They have two.
I don't know. I think they're probably out of respect to Mosley, letting him make his decision because he's earned that right. But I don't think it's a market thing for him. I think it's if he's healthy enough to play right now. He's been through a lot of stuff the past 2 years, and it's been a weird tenure with CJ. The COVID year, the Bills game, the injuries, but I've got nothing but respect for him for coming here. I mean, look, he would have came here with that contract back in the day, no matter what. But
How much was that contract for?
$18 million a year, I think it was. It was like $5 McCagnon, man. He just
this was like 5 years ago.
That was an I'm gonna make you offer you can't refuse kind of thing.
That's insane.
Yeah, and I remember waking up for that one and being like, "Holy shit!" Because they also had it was him and Barr, so like crazy times. But I will say, out of respect to Quincy, CJ, that he was, even with the money, he could have mailed it in, and he was always about turning the culture around. He was a great leader, and he was one of my favorite Jets, honestly, of the past, probably, 7 to 10 years. He's been a great Jet, so we'll miss you, CJ.
And this just turned into a CJ Mosley Jet eulogy. So
yeah.
That's sad. Anyways, let's move on to our last move of the day. Probably the one that ruffled some feathers, I feel like, on Twitter. Brandon Stephens coming from Baltimore. Obviously not the best face value statistical type of 4 seasons that you want to see, but I have some words I want to say on this. We'll start with Tony on this. Tony, what do you think of Brandon Stephens coming from Baltimore? Okay. Even though there's not much information or a lot of people have watched tape on him. But go ahead.
These type of signings crack me up because nobody knows. Like, okay, you could look at from a wide angle lens. You look at his last year, and it seems as though he struggled, and he by everything I've read, he did struggle last year, right? The way I'm looking at this one, and maybe it's just me giving the benefit of the doubt to Aaron Glenn. I mean, listen, man, if this guy, our coach is a former cornerback, if he sees something in this guy, I'm trusting him, right? I'm trusting him more than myself, any of you too. I just am. I mean, he played the position at a high level. Me and Pat have a Ravens fan friend, shout out Sanchez, that gave us a little bit of the inside. He gave a little bit of an inside, view from a fan point of view. Apparently, he's very sticky. Like, he locks guys up, but he just doesn't turn his head around. So, in my opinion, I feel like he's going to be a little bit more on the frustrating side. Not turning his head around. It reminds me of Kyle Wilson way back in the day. That guy did it what seems like every freaking play, which is rather annoying. But listen, he offers versatility. He can play both corner and safety. And the number might pop off the page to people, $12 million. But like I said before, 12 is the new 8. And I don't want to say it was probably a little bit of an overpay for the year that he had last year. But if you go back and read on him in 2023, he had like this breakout year and was a great player. Personally, myself, I have not been able to dive into the tape on him yet. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an expert on this guy, but I'm not going to trash it but I'm also not going to say that I love it. I'm just going to say let's wait and see. I think that's the approach I'm taking on this one. And I mean, it's a cornerback too. Sauce Gardner tweeted today, anybody that's playing alongside me is going to look pretty good because they're going to be getting the number 2 guy. And hopefully, I pray to God Steve Wilks has Sauce Gardner traveling with the best receiver on the field this year. That's been my biggest problem with the previous regime, that we have an all-pro cornerback that doesn't travel. But I'm going to say wait and see. I'm not doing backflips. It wasn't a buzzkill, but we needed a cornerback too, and a lot of them unfortunately were outpriced.
Like, do people want us to go out and sign Chardavius Ward? Like, I don't understand. We got to go pay Sauce Gardner. Like,
I love it.
I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead, but like, this is it's pissing me off going through Twitter and reading on this guy. Like,
I was a little confused. I want to see the full contract because, again, we overreact to the initial numbers like I did with Sherwood, but I would imagine that it's probably a similar structure to the Sherwood deal where they can get out after 2 years, something like that, right? Maybe a low cap number this year raises up, something like that, right? So I don't want to jump down the contract too much yet. Had a great 2023. The stats are really ugly from last year. Second most yards allowed in the league amongst corners. No interceptions, 4 touchdowns allowed. That's all from Nania. So thank you, Nania, for that. And I was listening to a clip from Connor Hughes before, a friend of the pod, that said he's the type of guy that is always there to make the play, but just doesn't make the play. Oh shit, my lighting went out. Eric DeCott, hold on one second. Let me get my lighting back.
for people listening, his lights went out. No one that is actually listening to the podcast would know that.
I think my mic went out in the beginning of this, by the way. I don't know if you can notice that. It's definitely not this one.
So, Eric DeCosta, the GM of the Ravens, he said that he was moved around a lot in his career. He went from safety to corner, back to safety. That could have had something to do with it. I think that brings some versatility to us. But I had some Raven fans. I have 2 Raven fans friends, right? They weren't like upset he was gone. That was a little concerning to me. My first friend, Andrew Sanchez, shout out, said that. First, he said he's incredible. I was like, what? Incredible? And he said 2 years ago he was incredible, but he was one of the worst corners this year. He's like Velcro on dudes, but never makes a play on the ball. My other Ravens fan, shout out Will, said, not the best of years last year. Ravens fans were shitting on him all season. He's historically been solid, but he just had a tough run last year. So, what does that mean to me? I think that Aaron Glenn is banking on coaching, right? If I'm going to give Aaron Glenn the benefit of the doubt that if he is signing a corner right now, he's saying, I'm going to coach the shit out of this guy, and it's going to become, maybe he fits into our scheme better, right? So I'm going to give Aaron Glenn the benefit of the doubt on the signing, and hopefully, now while they're not the same position, I hope it's the John Simpson type of thing. And I thought this was hysterical, which I want you to bring the image up of, Joey, is that a fan tweeted at John Simpson, because John Simpson knows Stevens was excited, and John Simpson, this fan tweeted, bro, I thought you were going to be horrible, and you turned out great. Now I'm thinking the same thing about Brandon. Let's see if he can outperform our expectations. John Simpson just wrote back, what the fuck? Which I thought was great. So let's hope that happens to Brandon, right? So the only thing, here's why this is what doesn't make sense in my head, okay? Again, we got to see the contract, but if you're paying an average of $12 million a year to a CB2, I really would have just preferred that they ponied up for DJ Reed.
Didn't want to be here.
I would have preferred that you went for Eccles, right? And maybe they still will sign Eccles, and I hope they do, and let these guys duke it out for CB2. I would have just preferred the Eccles draft another corner route or just pony up for. They probably tried to pony up for what I heard. We were in it for Carlton Davis and we just lost out. So, maybe this was the pivot move. And look, at the end of the day, Aaron Glenn has given me no reason to question a signing yet. And it's a position that he is coached up. So you got to bank on that. This is what he's here to do, right? This is like solid with linebackers, right? Like, coach the shit up out of this guy, and hopefully it turns into a really good value signing.
Let me just say this.
I also think that this takes Will Johnson completely out of play at 7.
Yeah.
because now you're pretty much, this is your cornerback trio now. They're invested. The Sauce deal's, for what I've heard, done.
Ooh.
And I will say that I've heard it's done. But so I think this also really narrows down after today what we're going to do at 7. So that's my final take on it.
And I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying this. I agree with everyone who's saying it's not a good signing. You just got to literally just take a breath. Deep breath into the microphone, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Like, the guy hasn't even arrived at the facility yet, and he's just automatically not a good player, which I hate. It goes both sides. Bryce Huff was a freaking monster with us. He won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles and barely saw the freaking field this year. You just don't know how it's going to go. It could go both ways. A guy can be coached up, he can become better. Just because he's been in the league for 4 years and he doesn't have the best stats does not mean anything. Aaron Glenn could see something in the way he plays, stylistically, across from Sauce Gardner. I think we all just need to just calm down here. The main issue with him, like you said, Tony, is like he sticks on guys, but he just doesn't seem to make the play. He almost makes the play, which is obviously not great, but hopefully Aaron Glenn sees that in him and says maybe if we make these adjustments. I'm just going to trust the football guys to do the football things, and the guy who was a very good corner in the league for a long time and has been a coach on the defensive side of the ball for a long time to fix and plug him into CB2. Maybe he is a Jag. I'm not sure. I don't mean Jaguar. I mean just another guy. But I really do feel like they see something in him, and I'm going to trust Aaron Glenn to do what he needs to do there.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing. Clearly, they have a type. It's going to be big physical corners. I mean, this guy is a physical corner, and you're going to see that in his play. They're going to want to press man coverage and blitz the shit out of the quarterback, and that's just what a Steve Wilkes defense is. This guy kind of fits that bill. It just depends if he can learn to turn his damn head around. So we'll see.
I like what Sauce said too. He just said, "Look, anybody's going to play good next to me."
Yeah.
It's been going back to college, so let's run it, man. I mean, like I said, we have to give this new regime the benefit of the doubt until they give us a reason not to.
All right, and before we hop off here, any day 2 expectations and rounding out the rest of the week? I don't want to go too long here on a breaking podcast, but either one of you guys.
Yeah, I'll give it a rip. Fat guys. I think they're going to sign fat guys. That's my prediction. They need guys on the interior of that defensive line. We haven't seen one yet. If you guys have any options, let them rip right now. But they're going to sign 1 or 2 defensive tackles, and they're definitely going to draft one at some point. So they're going to fill that up. A safety, that's definitely still on the table. Connor Hughes obviously mentioned Javon Holland. That seems a little much for me. I would hop on this podcast and be very pumped up. Javon Holland's a really good player, very drippy as the kids are saying these days. So I would be pumped up, but I can't really see them going that direction. Maybe like a Justin Simmons, he's 32. Maybe he's going to be a little bit cheaper. So that's what I would keep an eye on.
Pat?
I think wide receiver.
Yes.
And a couple of guys went as the pod was going. Darius Slayton's back with the Giants. Matt Collins, not that we would have signed him,
Darius Slayton
but
back?
Yeah, I signed a 3-year.
he's back with the Giants. Yeah.
Fuck. All right.
So I would expect Tim Patrick. I don't know if that's a day 2 like splash signing, but again, I think he's going to be in the fold. Yeah, I think he's going to be in the fold. I do think they're going to go for the safety position. I'm with you. Like, I would be shocked if they threw like $17 million a year at a safety. But look at Aaron Glenn's defenses and look at the safeties he's had. So he values his position a lot differently than Saleh did. So I could see something like that. And I would really like when you talk about fat guys, I really just want them to go into the draft with at least some sort of plan at right tackle, so they're not just, pigeonholed into taking Membu or Will Campbell at 7, and we all just know. I'd really like to see them just go best player available at that 7 slot, and if it is Membu, great, right? But I just would like that flexibility there. So in terms of predictions, I think you'll see 1, maybe 2 signings tomorrow. I don't see any like huge splash signings. I see more. I think their big splash signing was probably Fields. So, but nonetheless, happy that they they knocked a couple of holes out. They knocked a couple holes out here. This was a very encouraging first day. I really didn't expect Sherwood to be locked up. I didn't expect a CB2 to be locked up so quickly. And, Fields kind of picked up steam over the last 48 hours. But look, I mean, we are day one in the free agency and we know who our QB1 is for the foreseeable future. That is, and it's got some hope to it. That's a good start for us.
I would say, for me, I agree with most of what you guys are saying. Wide receiver in some capacity, I think a Tim Patrick and maybe someone else. I don't know if this. I'm just bringing it up for news. I'm not saying the Jets will do it, but Cooper Kupp looks like he's going to get cut. So there's still guys out there Diggs, Allen, Cooper, Lockett. Not saying that we're going to sign any of these guys, but there's still plenty of options out there. I'd be interested to see if we go out and get a blocking tight end potentially. I've been seeing a lot of smoke around that, and then we kind of need guard help. I know Wes Schweitzer is gone, so it'd be nice if we maybe signed another, some depth there at the interior position. But yeah, I would like to see some D-line help if they don't end up going they get Mason Graham, yeah, that'd be great. But I'd like to see some sort of help there on the defensive front.
One more thing I do expect too is I expect a big extension. I'm expecting Sauce to come out within the next 48 hours. I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Yeah,
so I think that's going to be their. If you're talking splash move, I think that's their splash move.
And I just wanted to touch on one thing that Joey said. Guard help. If there's one thing I just want from Darren Muji, it's to be able to use your picks in the middle rounds of the draft to fill out depth.
Please.
That is what Joe Douglas could not do for the life of him outside of Michael Carter. You fill out depth with the middle rounds of the draft, and I just hope that that's how they utilize that. That's how I'll leave it.
All right, well, that is all we got today. Make sure to go follow everything at NYJ_Vultures Row on Twitter, Vultures Row on YouTube. We're on Spotify as well. I'm working on getting it on Apple as well, which has been kind of a pain in the ass. But, well, what's new? That's Apple. They're always giving me problems. But, yeah, that is what we got today. We got a new quarterback finally, and that's how I'll leave it with you. And as always, go Jets. We'll be back on Friday for another episode. Peace, guys.